Hey everyone, this is Greg. Welcome to the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center, Air and Space Museum. Wow, that's a mouthful. Welcome to my channel though, Greg Express Travels. I'm here today to take you on a tour of this great museum near Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. So let's go inside the museum. It's two large hangars of aircraft. I think you're going to really enjoy it. It's got a really massive look to it when you first enter in to the Boeing Aviation hangar. Wow, there's a lot of planes in here for sure. Now this is a part of the Smithsonian Institute, but according to the tour guide, it was built with private donations. And Mr. Hazy gave a record $66 million, and that's why his name is on the building. But just look at this. Wow. Just a massive hangar here. And you can just tell, look at that. Right there is the famous Blackbird. More about that later. And then, of course, here is one of those famous Flying Tiger planes from World War II. Let's get a little bit close up of that one for sure. That was always a fascinating one. I remember reading about it when I was a kid growing up in school. There was this one plane here that has the Nazi logo on the back of it. That's the only plane I saw from the German side of World War II. But you can see as we look through here, there's a lot of planes. They're parked really close together, and they're also way up, hung up above us in this hangar. But just give you a brief overview here, of just so you can see how many planes are in here. It's really quite spectacular. Just definitely the largest collection I've ever seen of planes. That's truly for sure. Well, if you're a big fan of Lufthansa Airlines, here's one of their early propeller planes. How cool is that? And then look over here. I didn't expect to find a big Boeing plane in here. This is actually what is a Boeing 367. If you have ever flown on a 367, please leave me a comment below. I'd be happy to hear from you. I'm used to traveling on the 777 or the 787. Wow, here's a little wooden plane that they snuck underneath the wing here. Seems a little bit out of place, but that's okay. There are so many planes in here hanging up on the ground level. I mean, wow, just take a look at this. It's really overwhelming, but truly spectacular to take in. Let's take a look at a couple small planes. This is actually the world's smallest plane, called the Sky Baby. It's got a very, I'd be afraid to get in this one. It has got a very small wing and a small propeller. And remember this plane? If you saw the James Bond movie Octopussy, Roger Moore flew in this plane to escape from the bad guys. Pretty cool for sure. So glad to see that one. And here is the Concorde. Look at that. Wow. I think they started flying back in 1976, and then they ceased operation in 2003. But that could fly twice the speed of sound. I remember living in Florida and the Concorde coming into the Tampa airport and hearing that sonic boom. That was truly spectacular. An incredible sound for sure. Well, look at this. It is a Star Wars X-Wing fighter. It was very cleverly built with just some drones, and they made it look like an X-Wing fighter. Isn't that really cool? Here is the Spirit of Texas helicopter. It flew around the world in 29 days. I believe back in 1982. Isn't that amazing to fly a helicopter around the world? Man, that'd be awful scary to me. But here's some more helicopters I thought I would show you guys here on our tour today. There was a bunch of them in here. I've never ridden in a helicopter. I've always kind of been afraid to. But if you've ridden in a helicopter before, leave a comment below. This one I'm calling the Tommy Hilfiger helicopter. It's pretty obvious, right? By just taking a look there. And look at this one, just this one-seater helicopter. But it's got two sets of blades. I'm still not too sure. Then over here is a U.S. mail plane. Wow, it's an old one. Remember the old days when you'd go to the post office and they would stamp air mail on your letter? Well, moving along, here is the carriage underneath the Goodyear blimp. Wow, I just recently saw the Goodyear blimp too. It has been around for a long time. That is so cool to see what this carriage looks like. That is awesome. Over here is the Breitling Orbiter. Now, if you remember, this is one of those balloons that went around the world. That is really cool. I remember when that happened. And then here is the Red Bull Stratos capsule. Wow, this is when Felix Baumgartner went supersonic by jumping out of this thing in space. You know, he broke I think he went over like the speed of sound coming out of this thing. That was an amazing Red Bull challenge. Well, we'll continue on with our journey here. This is an American jet. Let's see, I believe it was built by Northrop Grumman. Pretty cool looking. And then look at this old biplane. Wow. You talk about being brave as a pilot. This is the Fowler Gauge biplane. I'd be pretty scared to get that one. They were really brave, those early pilots. Truly amazing. It looks like the best thing to do now is go into the next hangar. This is the space hangar where the Space Shuttle Discovery is at. Wow, look how big this is. This thing is humongous. But they also have a spacesuit here. There's nobody around, so let me get a quick picture of that before we go in to this other hangar. The Space Shuttle Discovery. Wow. 39 missions in space over 27 years. This is the shuttle that actually launched or deployed the Hubble Space Telescope, made numerous trips to the International Space Station. It is super cool, but man, it looks like it's been through a lot, doesn't it? Look at this, wow.
The tiles were always a challenge to maintain, so by the time Discovery was coming off the production line as the third shuttle to come down the line, they were looking for a way to reduce the number of tiles they had to deal with. So they came up with this idea, what if we were to make the silicon glass material that would withstand heat up to about 1200 degrees Fahrenheit? What if we were to make that into a quilted type material? That's
I believe America should commit itself to putting a ban on.
Found a couple little funny things here with this little telephone booth. Look at that. That's funny. And then they got an R2-D2 mailbox. Pretty funny stuff here at the museum. Here's the back end of the Space Shuttle Discovery where you can see the rockets. Man, they are huge. Over here to the left is a cruise missile. Every once in a while you hear about a cruise missile being launched. That's what it looks like. Well, we've ended our little tour here of the space hangar, but I'll take one more look here at Discovery before we move on. We've got one little area left in the other hangar to cover. Look at this. It is the Blue Angels. Wow, if you've ever been to an air show, most likely you saw the Blue Angels perform. This is the F-18 Hornet. This was also used in the recent Top Gun movie. Not the first one. That plane is coming up in just a minute. But in the latest Top Gun movie, they used the F-18 Hornets flown by Tom Cruise. This was always a personal favorite of my father's. He even had a book about the Blue Angels in his home. And then, of course, here is the F-14 Tomcat. Now, this is the one that was used in the first Top Gun movie. So you probably recognize it right away if you saw the Top Gun movie with Tom Cruise. Super cool. There's a really large Army helicopter here. The Sea Knight. Wow, look at that. That thing is huge. And then over here, I believe this is a Cobra helicopter. Yep, it's a Cobra helicopter. I think that was used during the Vietnam War period. Man, that thing is awesome looking. And finally, we got to the Blackbird. This is the famous spy plane. I think it was most famous because it got shot down over Russia during the early 1960s. You can read about that. But yeah, this is the Blackbird. That is super cool because it was a very famous plane and famous for being a spy plane. Finally, we end up in the gift shop on the way out. Just want to give you guys a quick tour. They got lots of shirts, mugs, failure's not an option t-shirts here. Look at that. Wow, they got everything you could possibly want. They've even got a Snoopy mug. Now, a lot of you probably didn't know Snoopy was the first beagle on the moon, according to these cups. I like this. I need some space. That's pretty funny and a cool way to end our video today. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tour of the Air and Space Museum. I'm Greg, and my channel is called Greg Express Travels. Thanks for watching. Please take time to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Bye-bye.